This is the video cast for the coffee industry by the coffee industry. By now, if you've been viewing it, you'll know that in these videos, you can join the panel navigating the current lockdown, the daily challenges, the daily changes, and seeing how they are coping and how they're adapting with everything that's going on. Today, we have got a supply chain conversation. So with me, I have Daniel Cortez from Café, Finca, Los Andes. He's a coffee producer in Colombia, and he will explain a little bit more about what's happening on his side of the pond. We've got Max Dubiel, as always, from Redemption Roasters. We have Sam Langdon from 32 Cup, who's a specialty coffee merchant, and we have Jamie Marler from Macanta, also a specialty coffee merchant. So clearly with the cessation of trade in coffee shops, and we have now discussed this several times in the last few weeks, there's a reduction in wholesale. So we know that already, because of this oversupply, obviously that's impacting on producers in a way that we may be not completely aware of, certainly from a consumer perspective and possibly from an operator perspective, because operators have so many other things to worry about, not least how they're going to reopen and things like that. So actually thinking further down the line can sometimes get missed. And I just think it's really important that we have that conversation to find out what's happening now for the producers and then what we're doing so that they understand what's going on. So that's the kind of vibe that we're going to have today. So to start off, I thought, Daniel, perhaps you can say to us exactly how lockdown, the COVID-19 and the situation over here in the UK is impacting on you as a producer.
Okay, hi to everyone. As Anya told, I'm Daniel Cortez from Colombia. Along with my father, we are coffee producers, specialty coffee producers here in Huila. And the lockdown is being quite a challenge. Like in a general situation, it's a problem because, commercial coffee, most of the pickers are from Venezuela. A lot of people have come to Colombia in looking for job opportunities. So they found in coffee, picking coffee, a really good job opportunity. So people from Venezuela travel all around the country, picking coffee, looking for farms where they can pick coffee because it's a day you work, a day you get paid. But due to the current situation, they can't do that anymore. And because it will be a great crisis spreading the virus all throughout the country. And also for specialty coffee producers such as ourselves, we use people from around the village and also people that travel from all around the country that come to our farm and pick coffee, people that we've worked before for a long time. But now we can't do that. And for example, our midterm harvest is coming like next month. Unlike other farms that are in a lower altitude with a hotter climate, this is the main harvest. So there are a lot of farms that have a lot of production and no one, and like a really reduced labor, pickers and all of that. So the great risk is that you don't pick your coffee and it goes over mature and you lost your coffee. So for now, we are preparing, start talking to people in the village who have lost their job due to the current situation, due to the lockdown, and ask them if they want to go up to the farm and start like picking coffee. And we've been also like talking with the local government in order to like understand what are the recommendations for us, like hand washing, desanitizing the whole personnel after, during, and before they pick. So yeah, we're preparing because our challenge is like coming into like 1 month from now.
Hi everyone.
But I do know a lot of producers that
Carry on, Daniel. I'll say hi.
Hi Fabio.
Okay.
Hi.
And I do know a lot of producers that are going through that experience right now, that in their crop they use mostly up to 40 people, and currently they have 10.
Crikey. So Fabio, welcome. Thank you for joining. So we're just hearing from Daniel. Just to recap, Fabio, as you just joined, we've already started recording, but that's fine. So Daniel was just explaining he has a farm in Colombia, and he's just talking through how the fact that because of the COVID-19 situation, one of the big things that's hitting him and fellow farmers is the fact that there is no labour, because obviously with social distancing measures and fear of contagion, local labourers or even non-local labourers aren't able to be picking harvest, and Daniel, being high altitude with specialty coffee crops, is just about to face a harvest with limited labour. So it's an interesting thing to hear from a producer's perspective, quite how impactful the COVID-19 situation is, not just hearing from roasters as we have been so far. So so Daniel, I was just going to ask you, one of the other things that I know is sort of a concern for you, other than obviously the fact that you've got a massive harvest to see to so that you don't over mature your cherries and therefore lose an entire crop for the year, but also is what's actually happening in your target market. So am I right?
Yeah, for example, we do sell most of our production to a roaster who is from Saudi Arabia, from Riyadh. But the good thing for us is that the contact, he lives here in Colombia, so he comes here and tastes and said, "It's good, I'll take it."
Yeah.
But he's just one of them, and he's like the less than the 1% of the whole market, because most of the clients that we are sourcing and that we are working with don't come all the way to our farm in Pitalito, Huila to get the coffee.
Yeah.
So I was in Berlin and Hamburg and another Spain cities on December, and I was like getting a lot of contacts, sending samples, and I was getting very good leads and very good possible buyers. But now all of that has stopped because, for example, if one of them wanted to buy 8 bags of my coffee, probably they won't buy 8 bags anymore. They probably just want to buy one, and shipping one bag, it's extremely expensive and it's not worth it.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've been trying to look at other alternatives. I've been working in getting online sales as well, selling through Instagram, through WhatsApp, our roasted coffee.
Sure. Okay, so welcome Fabio Ferreira from Notes. That's the quick introduction to you there.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
No worries. Obviously to help Daniel and actually any other producers that are watching this, but also from a perspective of discussing supply chain and for other roasters that may be watching. What is the situation for if I can go to you first, Fabio, and then Max, and then let's talk to Jamie and Sam about the actual importing situation from a green perspective. How has the crisis affected, because I know, Fabio, you direct trade, don't you?
Yeah.
How has that affected your relationships with producers? Because we are in this oversupply situation, how are you having to adapt to your relationships with your farmers?
It's been like since I've been doing most of my coffee directed trades for the last 3 years, and I have trying to buy in advance all my coffee. So I was doing this really well because when we started roasting coffee at Notes, I was always like behind my purchases and always like desperate to get coffee from some importers in Europe, and always looking in the last minute. And in the last 2 years, I have been working to buy all my coffee in advance. So at the moment, I am sitting on 80 tons of coffee.
Wow.
So which is like in a year we do more than 100 tons on the basis you were before. So I'm not really sure how you are going back when the business starts picking up again. So it was pretty hard because it's like I just came back from a trip. I was in Central America, which I was about to bring 2 containers from them, and a trip in Myanmar, which I was about to bring another container. So I just like need to cancel the 3 containers because, you know, the amount of coffee I have in my warehouse in stock in UK already, it probably will be enough for me for, you know, the next, I don't know, 10 months, 11 months. So I've been telling everyone I cannot commit myself. So luckily, you know, in all those process, I didn't have a closed business for the coffees that we're buying. I was just like, you know, visiting them, bring the samples back and choose what I want to. And when the crisis come, I actually went just like 1 week before the lockdown, I was in Myanmar. So I was even scared about, do you think I can get back in the country or not? So I cancel everything. I was like, I gave the first step and contact all of them and say, guys, there is no way I can commit with the coffees. I haven't chosen yet. I'm not going to choose it because, you know, if someone else wants to buy your coffee, just sell it, because I think things is going to get really ugly. I'm not in the position to buy any coffee as I'm holding a huge amount of coffee in my stock at the
Quite
moment.
a lot behind you.
Yes, I was going to say, you couldn't have chosen a more suitable background to make the point, Fabio. So.
That's true.
What about for you, Max? I mean, I know you work directly through Macanta, but how has it affected you in terms of sourcing and where you are with your current stocks, etc.?
Yeah, we don't do anywhere close to those kinds of quantities overall. I mean, we're a much smaller business than Notes, but we were quite lucky on the direct sourced coffees that we had in stock. We were literally just about coming to the end of some of those stock lots. And then yes, we've been working with Jamie for a long time, and that keeps our supply chain a little bit more lean. We've also been working with Sam, and sometimes it involves an awkward conversation of saying, I know I reserved 30 bags of this, but actually is there a way that we can have a chat? And I think if you have a good relationship with your trader, then they have the capacity to help you out. That's of course a much more difficult situation if you're working directly with a farm, because it's their livelihood, and and you're their only client there. So it's helped us, and thank you very much for being flexible at times and keeping the supply chain lean for us.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, that is the benefit of using an importer, and obviously, you know, we carry that risk, we manage that risk for roasters, and sometimes, you know, it can be awkward, and you have to go through these difficult moments where you have to take stock back, or you have to maybe extend the amount of time that you're looking to hold on to it. But ultimately, you know, that is built into our pricing structure, and that's why we exist. I mean, hopefully we exist for other things as well, but for really in difficult moments, then that risk is hopefully effectively managed.
And how, for you, Jamie, and then Sam, how have your relationships with your farmers been managed?
I think, you know, we haven't cancelled any contracts, so, you know, we're sort of proud of that. You know, that would be really awkward if we had to do that, but at the same time, we're kind of deferring as much as possible, you know, and kind of getting as much, you know, good grace from our suppliers as possible, and looking to, you know, give ourselves a bit of breathing room, because essentially any coffees that we bring in right now, the reality is they're going to be stuck in our warehouse, and, you know, we're just going to be sat on them, financing them, and people aren't drawing down coffees right now. Yeah, sure, they've got online web sales which are booming, but it's not replacing the lost wholesale business. So we're basically just trying to push back as much as possible, but obviously you can only do that for so long. And so really the biggest effect is, what are we going to buy, what are we going to contract new? And I think the reality is that's going to be just greatly reduced. So I wouldn't say that it's going to affect our supply chains, other than just to reduce them from what we would have been buying had 2020 been a normal year.
Yeah. And how about for you, Sam?
Yeah, I mean the same really. It's you know, we're watching the COVID crisis sort of develop quite closely from January onwards. So you know, when we went into Kenya and Ethiopia and Central America to renew our contracts and secure new coffees, we're quite aware that there was kind of trouble brewing on the horizon. We didn't quite see it being, you know, as large and as global as it actually is. But you know, I think we're all fortunate in a lot of ways that, you know, the bulk of the buying was done earlier on in the year, and as the COVID crisis developed, you know, we were there ready to sign for containers. But you know, just watching and having analysed it prior has kind of influenced our decisions not to. You know, we're trying really hard to sort of maintain our position, not to go too long, as I'm sure you are, Jamie. These coffees, they're all through, you know, long-standing relationships and through supply chains that we've built, and you know, there's a responsibility back to the producers that we work with. So, you know, I think in the long term, though, it's gonna come out fine. But certainly over the summer months, when we look at Brazil and Colombia, which would be next on our sort of buying list, it's definitely an impact there.
Yeah.
Sam, has it affected the way that people are buying? So do you have more clients placing smaller orders of maybe also more pricey coffees, or has it literally stayed the same?
I mean, there was no clients placing any orders for any coffees for a while. So I mean, there's that.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, you know, it's beginning to pick up now. Like I'd say, I don't know how it is at Decanter, but like last week or so, like even like the last few days, people are sort of sticking their heads up and conversations being renewed. And I think the conversations that I'm having, at least with roasters, are based around small micro lots, 3-bag lots, 4-bag lots, you know, high-end micro lots, as you're talking. Haven't had anyone call me up about a container. Yeah. But I don't think we will for a while. You know, it's you know, it's just the nature of it at the time, at the present time. Yeah.
I was listening to a video, an Instagram TV interview. Nick at Assembly was interviewing the guys from Rave Coffee, and obviously their wholesale has fallen off a cliff, but their web shop has actually overtaken their wholesale business. So everything that they used to sell via the wholesale is now being taken up by the web shop, and so much higher revenues, much higher profits, but much more complicated production. And so yeah, wonder where they're sourcing their coffee, but yeah, hopefully you'll get a call from them soon.
Yeah, I mean, like,
I think it was the first call that I made in March.
I mean, look, we've got to respond to what the roasters are doing, and you know, I think it's more and more we're seeing, you know, roasters kind of looking at that model that Rave has. I think Pact have a very similar model, don't they? And they're kind of like, oh, right, these guys are kind of onto something. So, you know, it's like turning an oil tanker, you know, for a lot of people. I think people will start changing their models and sort of steering it around, and it will get there eventually. And then, but yeah, it could be quite a different industry in 8 months' time.
Yeah, I think the business that they were strong on the web shop sales as Pact Coffee has been Square Mile. Those guys are probably like, they doubled their sales and they are selling so much more. Companies like Notes, for example, we always had like the web shop sale channel for us, but it's never been strong. It was very little. We grow this business 10 times more after the crisis, and it sounds amazing, but you know, the sales on web shop represents only 1.7% of our revenues. It's absolutely nothing. It's like we have like the wholesale that we lost all. You know, the wholesale for Notes today is 55% of the coffee that we roast. So we lost it like 80% of it. The coffees for ourselves, we lost it all. So we stay with the web shop, which grows 10 times more, but it's nothing. It's just very, very little. So it's like the web, everyone say, oh, but web shop is picking up, it's going to be a new thing. Yeah, but it's not. It doesn't, you know, it doesn't cover, it doesn't do the same job you were doing previously.
While the market will look somewhat different, and people drinking coffee at home will continue to drink coffee at home,
Yeah.
especially as they've discovered that their favorite coffee shops have roasted coffee available to them. I know the gentlemen baristas have done very well with it, but again, they too are saying exactly the same thing as you, Fabio, that yeah, great, it's tenfold, but it's still not matching their wholesale and their obviously their own chain of store sales. So from a sustainable business model, it's not sustainable. But the question you asked, Max, actually is really interesting, and I was wondering from you, Fabio, if you've noticed with that increase whether it's any of your rarer lots that are selling, because I know this is something that Daniel and that certainly producers in Colombia are interested in from conversations I've had with Catalina, something Tom from Origin said was that he had found his more expensive coffees were selling more than his average daily coffees. So rarer lots were selling more. Ooh, we're going to the journey with Sam.
I didn't see any, it's like at the moment in our web shop, we have like a big range of coffees. So we have 3 rare varieties, which they are quite expensive, and their packaging is of 150 grams. And it's not selling more than sells our Nespresso compatible capsules, which is crazy. Like, it's like our compatible capsules is like is on the top 3 best sales. So it's like first best sale on the web shop is one of them, then second and third, and to me that was really surprising. 2 things that I have one of the things I regretted a lot. It's I've been saying that for so long. It's like the specialty coffee needs to get to the mainstream. So when I see companies like Roastworks or Union Coffee, and they are present in Sainsbury's and Waitrose, and I went to Waitrose here near to my house, and it's just like had no coffee one day. That's all sold out. And I was like, that's amazing, because it's like those guys, they had they are not suffering through those channels now, and the specialty coffee always fail to get there. Not sure why. Some of them doesn't want to be in supermarkets. They are too proud of it. They think it's going to damage their brand, which it actually it won't. And it's like the Nespresso capsules has shown me, because it's like it's something that everyone didn't want to touch there, and I've been studying this for so long. So when I came up with, I can see now how much it's been selling, because it is part of the modern life for the people, and it brings a higher quality coffee to the public, and also something that's much more ethical than other things that are in the market.
Yeah, I mean, it's something like probably around about 40% of households have an espresso type pod capsule system in their homes now. And yeah, they're absolutely looking for variety and difference, and they don't all want to buy the Nespresso pod. So having, the ability to buy yours or Maxwell's or anybody else who has, I've been telling roasters since I don't know how long to get capsules on their systems. And so you're ahead of a lot, because Union don't have capsules, for instance. So you're already ahead of some of them, Fabio. But yeah, I think there is going to be a difference in how we drink coffee. And it's about, right now, of course, though, we're faced with a situation where we're starting to hear the noises about reopening, right? And so now, of course, all of your clients in terms of your wholesale are going to start thinking about how they open and how they start re-roasting and how they get the ball rolling. So moving into a new channel or growing a new channel, it's still not too late, but I think a lot of customers are going to be looking elsewhere, aren't they?
Yeah.
In terms of what's happening with the producers then, what would you, the 4 of you, if Daniel was to sit now and say, what should I do for the next 6 months, what would your advice be to help other producers think about how they cope with upcoming harvests and the short and medium term lack of demand, because the demand is going to be so low? What would you, it's a really tough question. I'm sorry, I can see Jamie's face going, I don't know.
It is a tough question, because
I want to hear all the answers, please.
we know it's a tough question, because we can see like Brazil is going to start harvesting now, and Brazil is supposed to have like super harvest this year, which is going to be crazy. It can affect the market in terms of like the commodity price.
Yeah.
What I said for, you know, those guys that buy coffees from Honduras, well, they did something very cool last year. You know, they certify all their coffees are organic, and they certified it as a fair trade. And so it's like, you know, they still can get like a very good price out of the coffee, even if they don't throw this coffee into specialty coffee. So they can get like a fair trade premium price, which is going to be like $1.90 per pound. So, you know, to be honest, the $1.90 in a crisis like that, if you can get it, it's just like amazing. And I say to them, listen, guys, it's just like open your eyes for what's happening in the commodity market, because it's like it had like 3 weeks ago, Financial Times just was talking about the commodity coffee that has been sparkling. Knows that they are selling so much coffee because of all the buying from the supermarkets and all this instant coffee and everything. And I say to the guys, you are fair trade, you are, you know, organic, that it gives a huge value to your product. So it's like open your eyes for what's happening in the commodity, because it's like you minimize your losses. I know cost of productions, you know, I've been studying this cost of productions for organic farmers, and it is higher than if you have a farm that produces commodity coffee. But, you know, if you can commit yourself to not lose as much money as you'd lose if you stay with the coffee in your farm, it can be a good solution.
It's a bit of a case of
a long-term solution, though. It's not something you could just pivot to right now. But I think Fabio's point about the Brazilian harvest is really key. You know, the market is quite low at the moment, and we're on the cusp of what is supposedly a massive Brazilian harvest, but also a very high quality one. So a lot of good cheap coffee being flooded onto the market, and in the wake of a demand shock, you know, no one wants to make the guess at where the market's going to go. You'd be a fool to, but there's a good case for it, you know, staying low or going lower. And so, you know, maybe coming up with a quick solution now might be preferable, while the Colombian differentials are quite good. They're quite high at the moment, and the Colombian peso is very weak at the moment. So compared to this time last year, the Colombian peso is 20% weaker than it was against the dollar. So every dollar that's being sold now, you're getting 20% more pesos. So there's kind of a slight silver lining there, I think. But coming up with a quick solution rather than, you know, waiting it out might be preferable.
The thing is that other thing is that, like, specialty producers like us, we can afford to sell like a commercial price. The margins that just don't add up. And if we do have like the crisis of we don't have someone to sell the coffee to, we just gonna have to sell it to another big exporter. Like, when we sell to those kind of intermediaries, we are not getting the most profit out of our crop and the effort that we dedicate throughout the year to get the best coffee as possible. So some of us are working for, even Catalina from Cata Export approached me last week on a very interesting like solution and approach, and the initiative is called 6 for Farmers. So it's getting 6 bags of one farm to Europe and delivering each bag to a different roaster. So it's great, because what I told you before, if I want to sell one bag to a roaster in Berlin, for example, it's going to be really expensive, and it won't be possible to sell just one bag. But if you go and get some like really big amounts, I don't know, a ton or 2 tons of coffee in a central location in Europe, then you can start distributing small quantities into different roasters.
Yeah, I think I sent you some information about that, Max, and I'll put a link to Cata Exports in this video, in the details of this, so that anybody who's watching this and wants to know more about what Catalina is doing with Daniel and other farmers, then they can click through. Yeah, I know we haven't got all the answers for Daniel, sadly, and his fellow producers, but I think one of the things that's come through, as you said, is firstly to, not, I guess not cut your losses, but don't lose an entire, harvest for the sake of it, because we're not necessarily buying at specialty right now. But what about longer term? Because obviously what's going to happen is not all roasters are buying long, as you said, Max. Some are, as Fabio has, but not everybody is. So in a few months' time, as we start reopening and as we start, sales start going back to normal for wholesale, hopefully, or getting closer to normal, what happens for producers then who have had to skip a harvest, hopefully, but who aren't necessarily in a position to meet demand on, medium to longer term needs? What's the situation there, do you think?
I mean, I'd be very interested to know what Max and Fabio sort of see in 2 or 3 months' time in terms of how many people will actually be in coffee shops.
Yeah, that's the next question.
And how people's habits are going to have changed around wanting to be close to people, around hygiene, around maybe cash. Do people want to be using cash anymore? Because it's now, maybe it used to be covered in a few germs and cocaine or whatever, but now,
if they were lucky,
now it's got the virus on that'll kill you. I don't know, are people just going to be, are the coffee shop sort of capacities going to be reduced, and can coffee shop capacities be reduced? Because it's a volumes game, isn't it? It's about how many cappuccinos you can churn out. It's fine at the moment. I think fine. Everyone's furloughed. Maybe you're getting some kind of rent or mortgage holiday, so you can kind of stay in, waiting for the moment to reappear. But if you reappear and then all that funding is taken and you're operating at 60%, 70%, what does that look like? And what are you anticipating, Max or Fabio, for that?
Go on, Max. Sorry.
Maybe I'm being too optimistic. I think the guys 2 weeks ago were already joking at my optimism here. We've just reopened one of our shops for takeaway only, and at the beginning when we first opened, it was down to about 15% of usual trade. We're now up to sort of 25 to 30% of usual trade in 2 weeks. So we're seeing a really nice upward trajectory, and I'm projecting from that one onto all of our other stores to say, well, hopefully in 3 months' time, we'll be at sort of 50% capacity of our retail, and through that also 50% capacity of our wholesale. But I do realize that it's very optimistic. And also touching on some of the trends there, I think the overall trends of going cashless, of takeaway, of structuring your shops in an easy in, easy out way, those were already there, and those are going to be strengthened, which is a shame for the nice vibey coffee shop that people like to hang out in. That those will struggle, but I think fast takeaway coffee is one thing that really people crave and continue.
I agree with Max, because it's like the coffee shops, it sells more than, a cup of coffee, a cup of nice filter coffee or a flat white. It's also a lifestyle. What we really sell is the lifestyle of people to come and buy something that's craft, that's high quality, and we are taking this out of the general public. You cannot come and hang out in the shops anymore in the way you used to do before. We have been doing like meetings weekly at Notes with the directors, and we believe by the time we open, we'll be operating between 40 and 50% that what you were before. This is because, Notes is the majority of the shops, all the shops are in the financial area of the city or in places where we depends on the tourists. So it's really hard for us because we don't have presence in, residential areas, which is like, I can see those coffee shops, they will be like performing really well on those areas.
So you're anticipating this change in work culture with people potentially working at home having an impact on your your coffee supply then, or your coffee sales?
I think the really turn you're gonna see it's when the schools get back, when everyone gets the school is back. That what you're gonna see the turn where the business is gonna be at. You know, right now people has to be at home, the majority, because they have their children. So you cannot just like turn up in the office and leave your child behind. It's like many different companies we work with that they want to get people back to the offices because they think that people are not as efficient working from home as they are in the offices, so it's like the companies wants like people going back and getting to their normal normal life. So it's like, yeah, what it takes a lot of business out of us is the social distancing, is like people being afraid of coming to a coffee shop and be around others. The other turning point, you see like how the tube is gonna be if it's full. It's like, coffee shops will be full too. But if the tube is not full, if the trains are not, people are not coming to crowd places.
Maybe the underground's the litmus paper for seeing.
It is. The underground is actually is something that we have to observe and see what's going to happen there, because it's going to reflect in our business. And there is also like we have a big chunk of the business done for this lifestyle thing that people comes and have like the drinks and have a brunch at the shops, and that's is being taken away from us.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I've been doing, obviously, as you know, anyone who's been watching this, and some of you already know that I'm doing benchmarking for the industry, and a little bit of consumer insight, and a couple of things that are coming out of that, just to kind of verify some of the things that Max and Fabio, you have said. One thing is that actually most people expect to go back to the office. So far fewer than I was anticipating think they're going to carry on working from home. So I know there's this big kind of idea that this wonderful notion of working from home is going to continue and that we're going to have a complete change. The reality is that, as you say, Fabio, a lot of businesses want their people back in the office or back in the working place because they don't feel that productivity is high enough, and also a lot of people prefer to work in an office. So from that sort of, it's a small sample, but it's still a good distribution and a good spread. People are saying, yeah, they're going back to the office. And the other thing from the benchmarking is most businesses, most operators are anticipating 50% of sales by the time things are fully reopened and working again. So sort of, 3 months or so, and then moving upwards towards better sales, obviously going on long term. So I think what everyone has said already is pretty much on par. It is going to be a sort of a slower growth rather than an immediate bang straight back to normality, because there won't be normality until there's a vaccine. We all know that. One of those things that kind of marks the beginning of a normal day is grabbing a coffee, and I really genuinely believe that will return to the sort of habitual behavior of a consumer. And hopefully that's a nice high to kind of bring the conversation to a close. Did anybody else want to ask or say anything before we come to an end today?
I actually read something yesterday, I don't know about the validity of it, but apparently in parts of China now, Starbucks have 100% reopened and they're at 90% revenues, or I don't know, it's capacity of revenues as to what they were pre-COVID-19. So if that is a sense of behavior, then actually that's pretty positive. I mean, it's a very different market and it's a different, obviously none of us are talking about Starbucks, but might give some insight into that. Actually it's a little bit more of an optimistic outlook than we might think.
Yeah,
because restaurants in comparison in China are only up to 50% at the moment, but that's obviously with distancing in place, I guess.
For all of you that you are in the UK, which is like a really big market for specialty coffee, and like what are your recommendations for us producers? I've been in conversation with other specialty coffee producers which are in the same uncertainty right now. So like just your quick recommendations or your insights or something you could say to us in these moments.
One thing I would say, Daniel, is offer your clients some sort of experience, go for some funky experimental fermentation, to tell a little bit of a story with smaller lots, because that's what is selling in the web store, and that's selling direct to consumer. So and in smaller quantity. That's what we've been seeing here.
Well, it's time to get creative with the marketing, isn't it? Really, it's gonna, you know, how you frame the coffee, how you sell the story. You know, it's I think those are going to be the coffees that are going to move, like Max is saying. Yeah.
And people are becoming more geeky. People have more time, and I think the specialty movement is going to see quite a bit of a resurgence, because people have time to read up on origins and read up on processing methods and actually understand a bit more.
My recommendation is going to sound a lot more boring. I just try and seek out someone that can help manage your risk. Whether that be a co-op or an exporter. I know you said you were working with the person Kata Exports, but you know, they can help you on the down as well as the up. And fair enough, you know, people do like exciting things, but I don't know how big your production is, and you might not want to risk it on something too experimental, you know, especially when there's so many other unknowns at the moment.
That's the thing. We do experimented in the past with fermentations. We now are using like our trademark, which is a 72-hour fermentation, and it's got a really big and really tasty results. But the thing is that if we do experiment with heavier production and it doesn't turn out okay, so now it's probably, but the thing about the story and like getting great pictures about our process, our farm, and maybe that way that storytelling can be a solution.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. That's always added value.
Yeah, my recommendation would be a bit boring as well, and from my own experience, Danielle, so it's like I would try to get your coffees, if it was my coffees, on vacuum packs, you know, because it makes the difference to keep the quality. And if you have the exporter you are working with, if they have the facility to keep those coffees on a controlled room temperature warehouse, that's what I'm doing with my micro lots. I'm moving everything to a room temperature room, so just to make sure that I can keep long the quality of those coffees. I have been working a lot with like vacuum pack recently, and also some packaging that they put different gases inside, and it's like the quality of those coffees, even after 1 year and a half, they're still like you cannot see any difference. So yeah, that would be my recommendation for you, to keep those coffees as fresh as you can. So you know, as the market is going to be a little bit slower than you were experiencing the previous years.
Brilliant. That's 5 pieces of 4 pieces. Sorry, I said 5 because I haven't given any advice.
So give some.
Well, actually, one of the things I think that came about just before we started recording, and also something you mentioned, Fabio, actually, and this is for all of you, is I see no reason why specialty shouldn't start really pushing inroads into supermarkets and grocery and retail, more mainstream retail. So, and if I can help in that respect, I obviously can introduce people. So that's one of the things I do, and I'd be happy to help with that. But I think you know, getting a wider access to specialty coffee for consumers and heading towards that whole democratization, I think is, despite the arguments over price, I think is a way forward, and something that we have time currently to possibly start exploring. Okay, great. Listen, this has been a really, really interesting conversation. For now, I'd like to thank Max, I'd like to thank Jamie, I'd like to thank Fabio, I'd like to thank Daniel, and I'd like to thank Sam for joining us and chatting through what's happening in the supply chain. As a viewer of Lockdown Coffee, please subscribe, share, like, do all the things that YouTube people like you to do. Next week, we have Duncan from Extract, Max, and Sonia from Restaurant Associates Campus. And then the week after that, we're having our Barista Cast. So we'll be talking to furloughed baristas to find out what's been happening with them. So we've got a good couple of weeks of exciting YouTube Lockdown Coffees coming. And thank you very much, everybody.